obviously we're here to talk about fat loss today, but firstly, once this starts sorting itself out, we're going to, first I'm just going to give a little brief outline of what I do here and where I come from, and then we'll sort of delve into the best ways really to lose body fat and the science behind it. So, to start with, a bit about me. So, I'm a sports science background. I graduated 1999, and since then I've been working in the health and fitness industry. During that time I've done various qualifications with the Polygraph Institute, and currently I'm studying for a postgraduate diploma in sports nutrition with this Institute of Sports, the International Society of Sports Nutrition. The majority of my work is basically with people who want to lose weight. And in about 2003 I started to build my business here at the clinic, and luckily now we're quite busy, so things are going well at the moment. The reason why most people come to me is health reasons, so people are overweight, so trying to reduce the risk of diabetes, heart disease and all the other things that are associated with being overweight or obese. Sports performance, it's most sports, with better body composition, you can improve performance, or aesthetics, just looking good for your wedding, holidays, etc. So I do one-to-one personal training, which again, very nutrition based. Obviously with that we do strength and conditioning training, cardiovascular training, etc. We also do partner training. If two people want to share the session, we train two of them at the same time. One of the most successful things I've done here is open these indoor boot camps, which are about like a small group personal training, where we get 6 people, maximum 6 people in the gymnasium there, put them through some strength and conditioning exercises, help them with their nutrition, measure their body fat, and put them on like a 12-week program to reduce body fat. And people who are good with their training, don't really need the help with the training, or don't want to be pushed in the training, they just need help with the nutrition. We do nutritional coaching here as well, what I do. So let's get on to talk about optimizing fat loss. So the key question is how to lose fat, and pretty much how to keep it off. Everybody obviously can lose weight, but a lot of people put it all back on again. So what I'm going to try and do today with you guys is just to give you a few hints and tips of the best way to lose body fat. Now, without doubt, the biggest regulator of fat loss is energy balance. Okay, energy balance meaning the amount of food we eat, so the calories going into the body, versus the amount of calories we expend. So the amount of calories we expend is broken down into 3 main areas. One is your resting metabolic rate, which is if you were to wake up in the morning, do absolutely nothing, that would be how many calories you burn in the day. Physical activity, obviously the amount of exercise you do, the amount of walking you do, me moving my hands like this, etc. And the thermic effect of feeding. And what that means is the energy it takes to break down food and to digest food. And we can affect pretty much all these areas with exercise and nutrition to increase your energy expenditure, and obviously eating better, we can try to optimize the amount of food that goes in. But is it as simple as that? Is it as simple as a calorie is a calorie? Should we just cut calories? Should we just say, right, let's have 1,500 calories a day? That's it, okay? And this has been put to the test. Morning!
Hi, sorry.
This has been put to the test in quite a few studies now. And the first one was in 1971. What these guys did, they grabbed, I think the guys were between 20 and 30 years old. They put them all on an 1,800 calorie a day diet. So basically they were on a weight loss diet. So they were eating less calories than what they needed for 9 weeks. But the interesting thing is what they did. They kept the proteins exactly the same. So they had exactly the same protein, all 3 groups. All they did was manipulate the amount of carbohydrates going in and the ratio to fat. So they had exactly the same amount of calories, but the only thing they changed was the carbohydrates and fat quantity. And if a calorie is a calorie, we would expect pretty much everybody to lose about the same weight. Extraordinary. We've got the blue bars representing the group with the higher carbohydrate diet and the lower fat diet, and the yellow bars, you can see it's just under 50% more, or nearly twice as much body fat loss just by cutting the calories. So they had exactly the same amount of calories in their diet, but all they did was switch macronutrients, the protein and the fats, and they had different, even better results. So is a calorie as a calorie? Well, the calories in food, yes. The potential energy that's within that food you eat, yes, it is true. But how we metabolize the food, and digest the food, and use the food, and store the food, our body does in completely different ways. And this has been repeated in lots of studies where they're comparing low carbohydrate diets and low fat diets. The low fat diets sort of evolved in the 60s and 70s when people sort of started going anti-fat, and we get low fat yogurts and low fat, etc., etc. And more recently, people are sort of looking more at low carbohydrate diets. Okay, so increasing the amount of fats in our diet and protein in our diet, but keeping the carbs low. And rather than just looking at one study, these guys here looked at 87 studies over quite a few, I'm not actually sure of how many years, but quite a few years, 87 studies. And what they were testing was the effects of different carbohydrate ratios to protein ratios in an energy restricted state. So again, what we would expect, if a calorie is a calorie, things to be pretty much exactly the same. But as we can see, again, low carbohydrate diets, losing more weight. Low carbohydrate diets in the blue bar, losing more body fat. And also, which is very interesting, is the fat-free mass, which is reflective of your muscle tissue. You build a bit more muscle tissue, obviously eating more protein and eating more carbohydrates. So the science is favouring low carbohydrate diet as a more effective way of losing weight. Yes, we can lose weight if we cut calories, definitely. But if we manage to just manipulate our macronutrients, then we can, you know, the science shows that we can improve our results even further. So this author's concluded, low carbohydrate, high protein diets favourably affect body mass composition independent of your energy intake. And I think probably the reason why this is the case is two areas. One is by reducing the amount of carbohydrates, you increase your body's ability to burn fat, and I'll explain that now. And the other thing is the more protein we eat, the more we preserve muscle tissue. So don't get away from the fact that yes, we do need to eat less calories. That is, you know, without doubt. But we do need to look at maintaining muscle tissue and just trying to improve the way we burn fat in everyday life. So optimizing fat burning, and then we're going to look at energy storage. I took this is my own masterpiece. I took it from a more complicated biochemical diagram, and I'm going to try and run you through it, and hopefully it will make sense. So when we eat carbohydrate, blood glucose goes up. Blood glucose is carbohydrate, okay? And as blood glucose goes up, insulin needs to deal with it, because if the blood glucose keeps going up, we get diabetes, you know, not very good for us. So we've got this great mechanism of trying to keep it within a range of about 4 millimoles unit blood. What happens is that once insulin sees the increase in blood glucose, it will try and fire the excess blood glucose into your fat cells or your muscle cells. Ideally, we want this pathway rather than this pathway. Yeah? Once we've done that, once we've stored, most of it should go into your muscles as muscle glycogen, stored carbohydrate. Some of it will go in your fat cells. And then what we do over the days, we exercise, we walk to work, we sit at the desk, we go to the cafe, whatever we do, we'll generally burn carbohydrate and fat all day as our energy. Okay, that is what happens. And it will just be a mixture. Morning, you alright? Does that make sense, everybody? You alright with that? Yeah? Okay, so we've got this. How do we increase fat storage? And it's good to look at this first before we look at how best to break down fat. Blood glucose goes up. Now, if we don't do too much exercise, and we're tired and stressed, and we're at work all day, sitting at the desk, so we don't have time to exercise, so we don't burn too many calories, and we're not exerting ourselves to use muscle glycogen. What we will tend to do is, if we keep eating the carbohydrate, if we keep having like cereals and toasts and pasta for lunch and breads and sandwiches and stuff like that, we'll gradually fill up the muscle cells. And we can only store about 400 grams of, professional athletes, when they do carb loading, they can probably get up to about 400 grams. And it's also stored in the liver, but I'm just keeping it simple for now. So once we've reached our maximum, and we're not doing the exercise to break it down, to use that fuel up, it needs to go somewhere. Again, like I said, otherwise it will go into your blood sugar will go up. So insulin's great, and what it tends to do, it starts putting more and more into your fat cells. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? So, I'm not saying carbohydrates are evil, they're not. But what I'm saying is, if we don't do the exercise, we don't use it. It's not as simple as that, but let's think of it as simple as that. And if we don't use the carbohydrate, it will store as fat. Okay? So, and I think that probably one of the biggest reasons why we are becoming fatter is because the food that we eat is more convenient. It's all full of sugar and carbohydrates, and we just don't do enough exercise. Think of it. I was at a talk a few months ago, and some guy was telling me that we used to walk or exercise about 8 hours a day back in when we didn't have cars, etc., etc. Now we're probably lucky to do 2 hours a day, but we're eating more sugar, more starches and stuff like that. The general public. Okay, so now this has died. We'll have to move on to using this. So, how do we maximise fat burning? So, we're basically going to reverse the cycle, very simply. We reduce the amount of carbohydrates we digest, so we eat less carbohydrates than what we need. And up until you get to your optimal body composition, I would probably follow that cycle. And then you can start to look at increasing the amount of carbs. But for now, if we're looking at, let's say, need to lose 5 kilos, so what it tends to do then, your body will switch to becoming a better fat burner. It will start to use more of your fat as fuel, and that's what we want to do. And that's why I think part of the reason why these low carbohydrate diets tend to be more successful, because yes, in gyms work's quite important, but it's what you do in the gym that affects everyday life. It's what we want to achieve, okay? Because you spend 45 minutes an hour in the gym. I do 3, 4, 5 times a week. But what you do in everyday life has a bigger effect, because that's 8 to 12 hours, depending on how much you sleep. So how to minimise fat burning is before you go to. So when we go to the gym, if we don't have carbohydrates in our system, we're going to mobilise fat. And I'll go on to that again in a minute. So how to minimise fat burning is, before you go to the gym, why don't you have a banana? Why don't you have an energy drink? Why don't you have a bowl of pasta, thinking I need some energy to train? Because what all your body will do then is use that for energy, and just keep the fat to one side and use that another day. Okay? And if we want to mobilise fat out of the fat cells, we want to keep carbohydrates low, keep muscle glycogen low, keep blood glucose low, to encourage our body to take the fat out of the fat cells and then to use it for energy. So this is what I tell my clients all the time. Just remember that. Insulin stops fat burning. And there's a hormone here called hormone-sensitive lipase that's in your fat cells, which basically breaks down the fat and throws it in the bloodstream. And if insulin's high, caused by eating this sort of stuff, then this switches off, and it's been tested in research. So if we can keep insulin low, this starts to work more, we start to burn more fat. Make sense? There we go. So let's take it as a pre-workout. So we get up in the morning, we've got gym workout about 7:30. Get up at 6, you think, oh, starving. What these guys did is, I'm not sure which year, I think it's 2006's paper. They took 6-mile cyclists who cycled 60 minutes, okay? What they did, they tested them one day in a fasted state, so they would get up, and just go for that bike ride. They go to the gym without eating and do their cycle. The next day, an hour before they did the cycle, they took a glucose drink, so much like the Gatorade stuff, the Lucozade stuff. What these guys found, which is really interesting, this is the point at which they drank the drink or didn't drink the drink. Plasma-free fatty acids, that's reflective of how much fat you're breaking down out of the muscle. So the more fatty acids you have in the blood, the more reflective that is of the amount of fat you've taken out of your fat cells and put into the blood to give to the muscle to do the exercise. And this is the amount of time next. So we've got the time before, which was an hour, and then they measured the time during the exercise. So as you can see, as soon as they've taken the glucose drink, about what I said about this hormone, fat burning just starts dropping off amazingly. And then when they start doing the exercise, it doesn't increase much further. So just by taking in a bit of carbohydrate before your training, you're literally switching off fat burning. Okay? Now these guys who went fasted, they gradually, before the exercise, they're increasing the amount of fat they're burning, and then when they start exercising, so they need more energy, they start to increase the amount of fat they're burning. Okay? So, fat utilization, so the amount of fat burned throughout the whole of that rest and exercise, you're looking at nearly twice the amount if you just don't eat carbohydrates before you train. You're going to burn twice the amount of fat. So I found when these guys were showing this study, I was quite amazed really, and it changed completely the way I train. But then there are risks when it comes to fasted training. You decrease immunity, maybe not training as hard, and I get, if we do really super push, there are some people, not a lot, that may become lightheaded or stuff. So what they guys have done, they've tested it by having not carbohydrates, but just like a protein, like an egg, or a couple of eggs before you go and train, or one of the, fill this up with a protein shake, and actually found they had very similar results. So you can sort of prevent that immunity issue, and that I need something in my stomach issue, otherwise I'm going to pass out, by having a protein breakfast. Okay, so just to round off that, yes, we know reducing the amount of calories does help, but we can really help every day by fasting or just going protein before we exercise, or just take and make sure your regular exercise, so we're using those fat cells, so we're just encouraging our body to burn fat every day. And resistance training is probably, and has been shown to be, one of the best forms of exercise when it comes to keeping the fat off. And why is that? Because when you do resistance exercise, you maintain your muscle tissue. Okay? Yes, you do with cardiovascular up to a certain point, so runners and stuff have been shown that they can maintain muscle tissue, but definitely resistance exercise wins that hand down. The reason why we want to preserve muscle tissue, apart from the risk factors at the bottom, is that you do decrease the risk of fat gain, and you do improve your body's ability. So remember I was telling you about where the carbohydrate needs to go into the muscle. If you've got more muscle, you've got more of a sort of bin to put your carbohydrates in. If you're sort of like a, haven't got much muscle, you're like a really skinny, I don't know, say supermodel or whatever, then they haven't got much muscle to put the carbohydrate in. So the more muscle we can have, and I'm not talking about turning like Mr. Universe, but just training your muscles regularly is very important. And key things is this resting metabolic rate. So I looked at the energy thing, that took up, that was about 65% of your resting metabolic rate. Okay? Cool. So, and the reason why we want to preserve muscle tissue is because when we go on a calorie restricted diet, there is a risk of losing muscle if we don't address the amount of protein or the exercise we do. And these guys here on this paper, again over 27 years, they looked at 28 publications of just weight loss studies where they didn't exercise, and where they had about a gram of protein per kilo body weight. So that's probably about what we're recommended on the RDA, the recommended daily allowance. And they found that in men, and it was a little bit less in women, they lost nearly 3 kilos, so nearly 30% of the weight they lost was muscle tissue. So yes, they got on the scales and great, I've lost 10 kilos, but actually they've lost only 7 kilos of weight. Their metabolism dropped because they've got less muscle now, so they can never go back to eating how they used to eat before the diet. So just by dieting alone, yes, you will lose weight, but you're going to also put yourself at risk for lower metabolism, etc. Okay? And this all comes down to this thing called protein synthesis. So sort of ignore the top diagram. That's all that means is this line here is muscle protein synthesis. So when we eat, we increase the amount of muscle we build, and this dotted line is muscle protein breakdown. When we don't eat, the amount of protein we eat. When we don't eat, the amount of protein we break down increases. And I've got this is what I want to use. So imagine this is a brick wall. You've got protein synthesis here, which is the guy adding bricks to the brick wall, and you've got protein breakdown this side, which is the guy taking away. If we go on that, as soon as we go on an energy restricted diet and we don't really exercise, this guy continues working at the same pace. So he's always taking these bricks away from the wall, and this wall obviously represents your muscle tissue. This guy here starts to slow down. So all that's happened is this guy's going to take away more bricks than what this guy's adding. If we exercise, if we particularly resistant exercise, and if we eat more protein than what the recommended daily allowance, this guy will start to work harder. So what we don't want to do, this guy, imagine he stayed working the same rate, we want this guy to work as hard as possible when it comes to losing body fat. And it's threefold. Protein, increasing the amount of protein, so maybe helping if you think, I don't have time to eat or whatever, then sometimes protein shakes help. They're not there for bodybuilders, they're there for anybody really. And weight training. So, or running and stuff if that's what you do, but particularly weight training will help. This is put to the test back in 2003, and there again there are several more studies on this. So it's 24 obese women, and they put them into 4 groups. Again, they're eating less calories, and they're doing it over a 16-week period. So when we're talking obese women, we're talking, I don't know if anyone knows, the BMI is 30 to 35. So they're probably about 3 to 5 kilos overweight. Okay? So we had one group just eat carbohydrate, which is the CHO. One group had carbohydrate and exercise. And the exercise was walking 5 days a week, and 2 days a week doing resistance training. And probably they're overweight women who haven't really trained before, so the resistance training isn't going to be bodybuilding type stuff. It will be quite low level probably. Group 3 is just the protein, and then group 4 is protein plus exercise. So we're looking at muscle, the amount of muscle lost during this, cutting the calories by only 1,700. So as you can see, the carbohydrate only group lost the most. The protein only group lost the second most. When we add in exercise to both, it improves your results by far. So adding exercise to protein is the best way of doing it. But if you're not really a super protein eater, adding a lot of exercise, increasing your protein, but maybe keeping your carbs higher than normal, you'll still have a better result than actually if you don't train at all. So how much protein should we eat? Well, I don't know if this figure means anything to you guys, but this is the ballpark figure which tends to come up in the literature now. 1.6 gram per kilo body weight per day. That's it, day per day. And 1.6 grams per kilogram body weight if you're a 70 kilo, 60, let's say you're 60 kilos. 60 kilos times 1.6 is about 95 to 100 grams a day. What is that in meat? Well, there's probably in a 100 gram piece of meat or fish, there's about 20 grams of protein. So you sort of work it out. If again, when I get a person in for the first time, if I start throwing these figures at them, they're just like, it's too much, especially for some people who are coming from, really bad diets. A lot of people don't. So I'm going to show you in a minute what that sort of looks like. So I would say if you put a piece of meat or fish on your hand from that to that sort of size, that's probably about 30 grams of protein. So if you have that size of protein 3 times a day, you're pretty much going to be there. Maybe throw in a protein shake as well. So what it means is just adding protein to every meal you have. Okay? Look at yogurt. I think yogurt's a bit sort of dairy products a bit less, but meat and fish tend to have the most protein. How many times a day to eat this? They've tested this out. So traditionally, what we tend to do when we eat food, we go protein heavy at the end of the day. So if we're doing that, we're going to not. It's not going to be the end of the world, but if we are trying to optimize, probably the best way is 4 servings a day. And this was tested here. So they have a group on 8 times 10 grams of protein a day, group on 4 times 20 grams of protein, group on 2 times 40. And the amount of protein, so protein synthesis is that guy adding protein to the wall. He worked a lot harder. So I've done that. So first feed for a 65 kilo adult would be something like that, an omelette, protein shake with mixed berries and yogurt and all that sort of stuff in there, scrambled eggs and smoked salmon type thing for breakfast. Okay? This is if you had 4 meals a day. Some people are a 3 meal a day person. Then you've just got salad and chicken, so we're keeping the carbohydrates low because we want to maximise fat burning. You've got Pret. Generally, their protein-based salads are about 20 to 25 grams. Okay. Just if you're looking to lose weight, maybe don't pour all the olive oil over it. Just use half the tub, because it does. I mean, literally, I looked at. I love their chicken and parmesan thing, which Italian chicken, I think they call it. And I just looked one day and I thought, oh, it's only 270 calories, but actually when you have the oil, it goes up to about 500. So, but it's so just be aware of that calorie issue. Third feed again. The reason I put another Pret on there, like if you are a busy person at work, go and get yourself 2. Give yourself 1 to have at lunchtime, 1 to have about 4 or 5 o'clock. That's if you want to do 4 meals a day. And then the 4th feed, where most people will have a sort of meat fish thing or a stir fry or something. Okay? So we've looked at maintaining your lean mass. So, and I put up to 2.4 because there are some studies out there that, especially for bigger guys, at 2.4 grams. So 1.6 is probably the minimum. Spread equally over 4 feedings a day and regular exercise. So how do we put this all together? We know that to lose weight, we want to reduce the amount of calories, but we just don't want to cut calories. We want to maximise the long-term fat loss. So we keep the carbs low, so we keep insulin low, so we burn fat all day, and we try and preserve muscle tissue by getting the protein up, by doing resistance exercise, and maybe cardiovascular exercise. So putting it all together, how I tend to do things here. We have day 1 consultation, where I dribble on for an hour, like I've just done to you guys, about all the nutritional side of things, what to eat, etc. We measure body fat by doing this caliper testing. It's probably the most accurate compared to other sort of what I would call non-lab based body composition assessments. So you've got the bioimpedance thing where you can stick electrodes on your hands, but this tends to just, when they've tested it, come out a little bit better. But obviously it's not as accurate as going to a lab and being put in a pod or something and having it scanned. And I just want to keep, and what I tend to put on people is just the 3 T's. And nutrition is pretty simple, to be honest with you. I think the media tend to really make it all a bit too confusing. But as long as we get the amount of food right, and as long as we know what to eat, the type of food, and we know when to eat it, so don't eat bananas before we train if you want to lose body fat. If you want to maximise your fitness, then yes, maybe increase the amount of carbohydrates so you can train a lot harder. But if you're after fat loss, then keeping the calories at the right level by keeping the right kinds of food you're eating, so just keeping off the starchy carbohydrate that's full of energy that we're trying to not put in the body, and timing it right, and you're pretty much there, to be honest. So looking at it, 3 to 4 meals a day, hand-sized portion of protein. So this is put in really simple terms. So all that science has gone before it. It pretty much comes down to this. Unlimited non-starchy vegetables. So don't, put as much kale and spinach and broccoli and all that lovely nutritious vegetables on your plate. And just have sort of a third to a half a plate of protein with it. Simple. If you want to add a bit of, I'm a killer for mayonnaise, so I put a bit of mayonnaise, and that won't kill you. Ketchup won't kill you. Salad cream won't kill you. It's the wine and the biscuits and the chocolate and everything else that kills you. Like somebody came up to email me said, I've had a boring pork chop with boring broccoli and a glass of water for dinner, and I didn't even have brandy apple sauce because it has sugar in it, and sugar will kill me. So it'd be a bit funny with me. And I said, well, you should have had it, because I looked at it, about 4 grams of sugar, so it's really not going to make much difference to her. Her problem is she likes a bottle of wine now and then. So I won't mention her name, maybe she'll kill me. The type of protein to have, the type of food to have, the best quality protein. So again, there's lots of media stuff written about protein and how it's going to kill you. We would have probably been wiped out years ago if that was the case. But just eat the best you can afford, like the organic or free range and stuff. Don't buy your battery farmed stuff. And low GI fruits and vegetables. Okay, so berries and low GI, not bananas if you want to lose body fat. Timing, meal spaced every 4 hours, pre-workout, fasted or protein only to maximise fat burning. If you want to maximise further, have a protein shake after your workout, and then just try and stay off the carb for a bit longer, and then maybe for lunch or something, if it's a breakfast workout, then just have, you maximise again your fat burning. And like I said, train low, like we talked about. That should be in there. And then the final one is reassess. So we reassess you. 9 times out of 10, people in the first 2 weeks do really well. It's like, yay, brilliant, you've lost 3 kilos in 2 weeks, brilliant, excellent. And then we look at their lean mass. So that, by doing this, you can see if they've lost lean tissue. And you think, all right, are you eating enough protein? Then you go, right, you're losing a bit of muscle tissue. Let's try and increase a bit of protein somewhere. So we look at where in their diet they can do that and what suits them, because it all does come to individuality. And then we try another 2 weeks, reassess again. If we find they're not losing weight, and obviously there's something, if they're a compulsive liar or there's something else. But 9 times out of 10 they come in, they lose weight, probably lost some lean mass because most people find it hard to get their head around, just increasing the protein a little bit. And then we look at doing that, and maybe just training a bit harder. And that's how we roll, really. So thank you. If you have any questions, that's my email address, or you can email me at the clinic here. Thank you very much for your time, and ask me any questions.